Hey guys, this is Center Pin Fishing Addict. This video here is for a few people that have asked how I run a tandem or a dropper rig, what my setup is, because it looks different than most people have seen. I'm going to show how most people run them or set them up, and I'm going to show how I do it and explain kind of the benefits, what I believe to be some of the benefits of my particular setup and why it works, just works, why I like it, what have you. So the first one is the typical where you tie to the gape of the hook. So I like to do it where whenever I tie my hooks, I always like to have it, especially when it's my tandem rig, where I have the gape or the point of the hook pointing up. When you loop it through, you do one, I like to do 3 or 4, 5.5. So you do 5 full and then bring it back around and then through. Obviously everybody knows how to tie a hook, but now for the second hook, some people like to tie it like they'll just run the line over like the hook itself and tie it that way, which it does work, I guess. I did run it this way before. I'm a guy who likes to experiment with setups, but you can run it, you could tie it like this if you want, doesn't really matter. The other way is you could just tie the loop off. Now I'm tying this with high vis just so you can see what it looks like a little bit better, hopefully. And this is a size 10 hook. I very rarely, if ever, use a 10 hook for steelhead. Salmon I do, but that's how most people set up their tandem dropper rigs. Now as far as bead placement goes, what I tend to do for the top hook, let me find this hole, I hate this red bead. Okay, for the top hook I usually typically run my bead anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2 inches above. I find it works really well at that distance. You'll notice that my line wedges are cut in half, or bead wedges, whatever you want to call it, are cut in half. But that's typically the distance that I run my beads from my hook. Now if it's my bottom hook and I'm like, say I'm running a hook up top with a bead and then I have another hook down below, and I'll just tie one on quickly. Obviously put the bead on first. Now I never run the same color bead on both hooks. I always change it up. Even, you know, the closest I'd get to running the same color bead would be the same color, but one a gloss and one a flat color. Peach beads work really well, I find. But what I'll typically do on the lower hook is run the bead about the same distance, maybe just a little further up. And one reason why I do that, and I don't go, I've seen some people run them like this, 3 to 4 inches, even up to 5 inches away from the hook. The one thing I've noticed is that the people that run them farther away from the hook, you have more of a tendency, or there's more of a chance for it to hook on the outside of their jaw, nose, things like that, where if you have it here, the fish bites onto it, you got a better chance of getting them right where you want it, kind of thing. Now this is just preference, and everybody's gonna have different preference. The one reason why I cut my wedges in half is because it allows me to keep a compartment for line wedges in my case instead of having to keep them in the bag or the package that they come in. You can see I have a wedge compartment in both my bead cases. Now, the other reason is because I get twice as much use out of, one wedge instead of a lot of people I've seen put a wedge on, cut both ends off, and they wasted a wedge basically right then and there. This way you get, like I said, 2 riggings out of 1 wedge instead of just a single. Now this part here is going to be showing how I do it, and the reason why I do this I'll tell you in a minute. But this was a bit of experimenting, and my brother as well. He was doing this. We were both running a tandem setup, and I noticed that he was doing it a little different, so I thought I'd try it. Didn't think to do it, but it works extremely well. Okay, now the way I typically tie a tandem rig is just like so. I'll show you. Tie your hook like you normally would. Okay, so let's say this end here goes to your swivel. You leave a tag end really long. You can see I've got probably, like, let's say I set it up the way I would set it up if I'm on the river. I would have about 15, 16 inches between the end of the line and the hook where the hook's going to be tied. Okay, so okay. Now, when this is tied to a swivel, it's usually a lot easier to do this. Okay, so you'll have it, and what you want to do is after you put it through the loop, I like to have it so that that tag end comes off the back side. So what I'll do is I'll wrap it around my fingers like this, so I've got tension, a little bit of tension keeping it in check. Tighten up that knot. There you go. So now when you have it set up the way you want it, and you pull, you adjust the hook and you adjust the tag, the hook is basically just sitting out there like that, not being affected as much. Sorry about that, my camera went out on me for some odd reason, but anyways, what you want to put up to try to continue from where I left off, the idea is to have the hook, have the line coming off the back of the hook, so it would look like that. Obviously your bead placement would be no different than it was on the other setup, where you'd have it about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches above the bead. And then the idea is your tag end, which when you're normally tying a hook, you normally cut your tag end off. For this setup, you just leave it however long you need, and you simply tie on your second hook, and like you normally would. And obviously you want to put a bead on first before, but for this demonstration here, I'm just going to simply tie the hook on just so you can see what I do. Now, this here, like I said, usually it's about 14 inches apart from hook to hook, so bead to bead would be about the same. Sometimes I'll run a bead and a bag on the bottom hook. Other times I'll just run a bead and a bead, or I'll run a bead up here and a yarn fly down here, or fly down here, or just a hook with a worm. It's really dependent on what you want to do, what they're hitting on that day. You never know, it changes all the time. But having this setup here works great like I said, I've not had a problem. I've gotten 30+ pound salmon on this rig. Never had a problem with breaking off. As most fishermen know, like I said earlier, you get a knot, it made me look like a fool, but most line will break when line does break, especially if it's wet and been used and so on. When you get a wind knot or an overhand knot in it, breaks very easy, but this way works very well. It works great for fly fishermen as well, where instead of having it come off the back of the hook, I would have it come off the front of the hook. So you'll have one bait in the water, you know, your dry fly, and then this one would then drop down instead of it pulling down on the back of the hook. With, if you have your dry fly up top, you want it to stay somewhat up top instead of it being pulled down on the back side. This way it just works. So that's my setup. The one reason why I really like this setup is because instead of having it attached to the gape, like say a fish bites the hook or bites the bead and not the hook, and the hook's outside of its mouth, when you go to set that hook, if the bait is doing, you know, the lower hook is doing whatever and it decides to pull it out or it's flopping up or whatever, you go to set the hook, it's got a good chance of pulling the bead out. Where with this, it could be doing whatever it's doing, it's really kind of isolating the hook a bit more, where instead of it being pulling it like this, it's affecting it up higher. Yeah, you'd say, well, it's still doing the same thing, but it just, I noticed with the other setup, with the more traditional tying it to the gape of the hook, that you would get a couple of head shakes and they'd be gone, where with this, that happens a lot less. It still does happen, but I've noticed it's a lot less common. And the one way I could tell that this works better is you have less, I've noticed when I check my line afterwards, there's less burring or teething on the line from the fish when you go to set the hook, going through its teeth and things like that. So it seems to work a lot better. Hopefully this helps. Again, 5.5 gape up, 5.5 wraps, tag end down to your lower hook, and that's all you need. Best of luck. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.